Good morning to you. I am Mark Suttle with HurricaneTrack.com. Here it is Monday, the 19th of June, 2023. And in today's video, we're going to talk about this very unusual pattern that we have unfolding here in the month of June. We have Invest Area 92L, 93L out there, a record-setting warm Atlantic, the El Nino trying to come on. And then there was this forecast that just kind of got dropped on the 16th a few days ago. I tweeted about it, and it has caused quite a stir, and that is the update from the University of Arizona, their hurricane season forecast. We are also going to take a look at that. And I got a bunch of tabs over there from sea surface temperature data. We're going to go and look way back all the way to 1997 and compare and contrast some sea surface temperature data and a bunch of other things that we'll talk about as well. Okay, let's get on with it. A lot to show you today. First, National Hurricane Center. We'll go through this as quick as I can. You know how this is running. We got 92, 93L here. This has basically 100% chance of developing here. This is 93L, or 92, sorry. See, I'm already getting them confused. This one is 92. This one is 93L. And they are both in an area where you just normally wouldn't be looking this time of year. But here they are. Now, why is this not extending out towards the islands any longer? You might be wondering that. Well, because it is going to develop, it looks like, before it would get there. This little hatched area, the orange and the red, those are the expected formation areas. Once it forms, you don't have that anymore, and you get the cone of uncertainty, or whatever you want to call it. And so that's just what these are. These red and orange delineations are for the formation areas. Once they form, they're formed, and we get a tracking system with future 5-day forecast and so forth. So just thought I'd throw that out there. All right, let's continue on, shall we? Satellite animation this morning. There is 92L. There's 93L. There's another strong tropical wave moving off. And I just want you to make note of the date up there. It's June the 19th. Wow, like this really should not be happening this early. This is truly very unusual. It's not hype, it's not hyperbole. Maybe that's where that word hype comes from, right? This is really, really unusual. If you've been tracking the tropics for any number of years, you know we typically don't look to this area of the Atlantic basin until maybe mid-August and later. We are 2 months ahead of where we would normally be in terms of even being concerned about these areas. So what's going on? Well, generally speaking, it's these very, very warm sea surface temperatures relative to average and in actuality. In other words, they are way warmer than they should be. And I say way warmer, 2 to 3 degrees Celsius is significantly above the long-term average. And in some areas of the tropical Atlantic, the eastern Atlantic and the northeastern Atlantic, I'll show you in just a moment, we are talking 2 to 3 degrees Celsius above the long-term average. And then the actual temperatures are warm enough by just a little bit to get tropical cyclone formation. So we are well ahead of anything I think we have seen easily in the last 40 years plus. And that's just true. I mean, we can go back and look at the data. I've been doing this professionally for about 30 years, and I certainly don't remember ever talking about anything like this soon. 2020 was busy, 2005 was busy, but this is a whole new, I mean, it is. It's just, I'll show you. I'll prove it, right? All right, so let's take a look at the visible satellite shot, and this is from Weather Nerds. The prior animation, of course, from Tropical Tidbits, a lot of different sites that we can take advantage of out there to show you these wonderful animations and so forth. There's 92L trying to get itself together, and here's 93L now, newly designated 93. You can see some turning associated with that, and there's another system coming off. Now look, this is a visible satellite picture. It's black and white, but it's still visible. And notice what you do not see in June. You do not see a whole bunch of dust just blowing out here over the Atlantic. That helps to do a lot of things. It blocks a little bit of the sunlight, so it helps to cool the sea surface temperatures a little bit. The Saharan air layer, there is a Saharan air layer out there, but it's not dust-filled. It doesn't just choke everything off, acting like a blanket. The lack of African dust has been notable, and that's part of the reason why the sea surface temperatures are the way they are. But what came first? Well, it's the reduction in trade winds, because going back to this image real quick now, I get back to the bigger satellite image, we do not have this big sprawling subtropical ridge sitting out here just cranking the easterlies out here faster than normal, blowing all that African dust out there. We don't have that. That's not happening this year. Instead, the high is weaker. It's there, but it's weaker, and the water temperatures have warmed in response to that. As I said, the African dust is less, and these pieces of energy right here, they all came from Africa, and so it's wetter over the Sahel region of Africa, the equatorial region there, and so the African dust just isn't as prevalent. You know, it's been raining more. The West African monsoon more aggressive this year. All right, I was waiting to show you this, and here it is, the Vorticity signature, one of my favorite products here that helps us to really track what's going on with these systems. There you go. That's 92L. 93L is over here. And this, I believe, is Invest Area 90E in the Eastern Pacific. So real quick now, I don't want to ignore the East Pac. Let's go look at this. It's way out to the southwest of the Baja, and that's just the 7-day. Yeah, that's the 7-day, I think. Let's just make sure, because I thought it was going to be more pronounced than that. There's the 7-day. Yep. So that's interesting. It's 0%. So I just wasted time on it for nothing, but didn't want to ignore it. But yes, on the Vorticity signature, there is a little impulse sitting out there. I thought it was an Invest 90E. Maybe it is. Even an Invest can be basically nothing in terms of development. All right, let's move on, shall we? This is also really interesting. I want to show you a little bit of history here as we progress and set the stage for where the forecast for our various tropical waves, almost tropical depression there, 92L, where they might end up. First, though, a little context. This map here is part of our HurricaneTrack Insider site, and one of our supporters, one of our Patreon supporters, crowdfunding supporters, not only funding with money, money is what helps us to do what we do, but also his coding ability, and that would be a gentleman by the name of Howard over in Bermuda. And he made this map for us, this database. It's great, going all the way back to 1851 through last year, the points of origin. So let's get me off the screen because this is remarkable. Let me show you. June 1st through the 10th, going back to 1851, that's where the development is. All right? The 11th through the 20th, that would include today. And it's a couple areas out there now east of the islands. And finally, the 21st through the 30th. Look what happens. Let's just zoom in down here. Clearly a majority of the development is way over in the western part of the basin and the eastern Pacific. In that region we've had nothing this year. But let's keep zooming in down here because this is really important. What do we got? Well, this one is Brett, 2017, big season that year. Yeah, we all remember that. That's Bonnie, 2022. Yeah, it's a little bit of an anomaly there. Yes, it formed early, but it kind of petered out before really doing much, and last year was weird. We had Fiona, we had Ian. It was expected to be a very busy season. It fell short in terms of numbers and ace, but mega season in terms of damage and impact with Fiona and Ian. So 2022 was kind of a lesson in impact over ace, but let's keep going. 1933, one of the biggest seasons of all time. This one was a whopper. Howard calculated, I think, if his math is correct, that particular storm, they weren't named back then, generated 29 ace points, the accumulated cyclone energy. So 33 is a big year. Elsa, 2021, that was also a pretty big year. And of course, 1979, we had Anna, or Anna, however you pronounce that, short-lived before it even did much in the islands, and 79 was pre-active period that we are in. So the bottom line, development out here is exceedingly rare, and most of the ones that did develop in years that we know were busy were a harbinger of things to come. It's not a big sample size, but enough that if 92L develops, becomes a depression, and eventually becomes Brett, ironically, in a similar area geographically where Brett in 2017 developed, it more than likely does portend a much busier hurricane season than we were anticipating, because this is deep tropical development. All this other stuff over here, we'll get rid of me again real quick, all this other stuff over here could have come from tropical waves, but a lot of this up here, subtropical development, frontal lows that started, that kind of thing. When you see deep tropical development out here in the open tropical Atlantic in June, or July for that matter, it is a pretty big deal. So just, that's context for you. All right, again, some pretty good products here from Dr. Cowan and his site over on Tropical Tidbits, the current storms page. There's the satellite still. If you click on it, it becomes an animation. This is where it's located on the map. There's a ship nearby. But then here's what everybody wants to know. Where is it headed? Well, first of all, I want to make something really, really clear. We don't have a depression yet, and we certainly don't have a tropical storm. It's still just an invest. So speculating on where it's going to go, I know there's a lot of cruises planned, a lot of people going to Florida, a lot of interests in the islands. I get it, but we don't know. I certainly don't know. National Hurricane Center doesn't know for sure. They have an army of people working on it. There are various and sundry weather agencies and people on social media. Nobody knows for sure, all right? So we do have guidance that helps us. That's why it says that. Model, track, guidance. But we don't even have a developed storm yet. A couple other things. The GFS has been way too aggressive as a global model. The GFS would already have this as a pretty strong tropical storm by now. It's not. So it's probably going to stay weaker longer, meaning that it should track more west with time. That is a fairly confident statement to make. So you folks in the islands there, the Lesser Antilles, probably will see some impacts. What does that mean? Gusty winds, periods of heavy rain, squally weather, locally high waves from time to time. You just have to be careful as this approaches, be mindful of it. And it may be strengthening on its way in. How strong, we just don't know yet. But in terms of impacts after that, we're talking more than 5 days out, and we just don't know. It could eventually succumb to the usual impediments that are waiting in the Caribbean Sea and fall apart. It may track north of the islands. You see these little outliers right here, the AVNI and the AEMI. Basically, this is your GFS operational, your GFS ensemble mean. Why are these out here like this? Well, statistically, we call those outliers. Might not be the best way to apply that term here, but the GFS is very aggressive. Now, will it be correct? We don't know. It might be. The rest of the modeling generally is weaker and towards the islands. So the intensity and the track are related to each other. The stronger this gets earlier, the more chance that it feels any weakness in the ridging up here to the north, and it moves in that direction. If it stays weaker, it would tend to go more in the low-level flow, if you will, and track farther off to the west, all right, or further west, whatever. All right, let's move along. This, I dropped this out on Twitter the other day. A couple people tagged me on Twitter. I appreciate that. University of Arizona had their update to the forecast. Now, first of all, a lot of jokes out there about what does anybody even know in Arizona about hurricanes. All right, just to get this out, you got Penn State, and you have, and there's a bunch, right? You have Florida State, NC State, University of Oklahoma, University of Wisconsin, Colorado State University, University of Arizona, and I'm sure I'm missing others. Even UNC Asheville has created great meteorologist, Mississippi State University. And all of those locations, even FSU in Tallahassee, they're the only one that's really close to the ocean. Everybody else is well inland, even MSU and Starkville. So the location of the university has nothing to do with the academic prowess of the people doing the research. All right, so that's very important to note. And the University of Arizona has done these forecasts for a number of years. They weren't public until recently, and they've been pretty good. So I'm just going to look at this one PDF file, this one screenshot here for you, and we're going to look at a couple of things that are very, very important. Get that arrow out of there. So first of all, the numbers. Everybody likes the numbers, right? Their April prediction was 9 hurricanes, 5 majors, 19 named storms, a pretty high ace of 163. All right? The June update, 12 hurricanes, 6 majors, 25 named storms, and an ace of 260. Lots and lots of hemming and hawing and scoffing at this on Twitter. Lots of, it's never going to happen, so forth and so on. A lot of people seem to know the future. This is a prediction. It's probability. All right? It could be wrong. It could be right. Even if it's 70% accurate, that's a very busy season in the face of El Nino. Speaking of El Nino, this is an important paragraph right here. The April-May multivariate INSO index, the MEI, was slightly negative in April and May. Though El Nino has recently rapidly onset, the MEI values did not get high enough by the end of May when they started all this to be included in their model. We only use an INSO factor if the May tropical Atlantic sea surface temperatures are cooler than average or the MEI was greater than 1 by April-May. So this is really, really important, and here's, I think, where we have to say, okay, this does have some merit. Yes, the El Nino has come on, but it is not particularly strong, and as I'm going to talk about, it doesn't look like it's going to do so until later in the year, maybe late September, October. Eric Webb, I mentioned him a lot, has talked about this recently. Others are starting to pick up on it. There has been sort of a stalling of the rapid onset of El Nino. It's kind of like when a certain team, just a quick sports analogy, comes out of the gate, football, okay, they come out and they score 4 touchdowns in the first half, the other team, none, and you think they're going to blow them away. And then by the start of the third quarter, they start slowing down, the other team starts coming back. You get the idea. The El Nino came on quick, and then now it's kind of flatlined and is stalling a little bit. Meanwhile, as I have shown you, the Atlantic has warmed significantly, and that is a big part of their overall reasoning here. The very warm tropical Atlantic, in fact, it is so warm it could overwhelm the El Nino. That's the reasoning. The UK Met Office in England also sees that, if you will. The European model, the ECMWF and its related seasonal guidance, also calling for a very busy season. Not quite this busy, but there's more to it than just this sort of rogue forecast. That's air quotes, by the way. That's not my words. I'm just kind of making, people are like, that's just not believable. Well, we'll see. I wouldn't be so quick to judge. 1997. By this time, we already had a pretty significant El Nino. Just showing you some context here, all right? And the Atlantic had a little bit of a warm AMO look, but didn't do it. And we had a very paltry down season in the Atlantic. Notice, too, most of the rest of the globe was dominated with cooler than average sea surface temperatures. This is a long time ago. It really is hard to believe, right? And things have changed, certainly, since then. 2009, the globe is starting to warm up. Sea surface temperatures globally coming up. A little bit of an El Nino going on out here, a warm INSO, and not so much in terms of a hyperactive look to the Atlantic, and that year really didn't amount to too much, as you might recall. The last super significant El Nino, 2015. By this time, oh yeah, it was really coming on, and this is forget about it. It's over. Not going to have a big Atlantic season at all. Most of the anomalous warmth was in the subtropics, and we didn't have much of a season to speak of in 2015. The East Pacific, though, was like crazy gangbusters, as you might recall, and that's the look of a shutdown season. All right? What about busy Atlantic seasons? This is 2004. Pretty active look overall in the AMO regions of the Atlantic, kind of a neutral-ish look to the Pacific. In other words, the INSO was not a factor. And we had a really big season that year. You certainly remember 2004. Whether you were alive or not at that time, you've heard about it. 4 really big, impactful hurricane events for the United States. Several others, too, that were less impactful, but it was still a pretty big season. 2005, a monster season, devastating season. More of a warm AMO look, pretty classic there. And then, again, sort of a neutralish look to the Pacific. Neither warmer than average or cooler, kind of interspersed there. You get the idea. Now brace yourselves before I show you this next one. That was a very big season, 05. I could have brought up 2020, but let's just look at 05 because that's one that stands out in a lot of people's minds. That's the look that gave us, right there, a hyperactive season. That's what it looks like this year. Not even close. The Atlantic. It is not even close. And like, wow. I mean, yes, we do have a warmer INSO this year, but this is nothing like that. That INSO, that's an INSO. That's a warm El Nino, I should say, El Nino. This is really, really, we are truly in uncharted territory here. That look to the Atlantic. This is also interesting how the cold water has kind of made its way down close to the equatorial region down here, bleeding into the Nino 3.4 area. Until this El Nino really comes on, which it may take a few weeks longer, and every day is going to matter, a forecast like what we saw from the University of Arizona is not entirely, I mean, come on, they wouldn't put it out there if they thought it was, they would look at their numbers again and say something's wrong. All right, they would. So this is really, really important to note as to why we're having what we have now with a system here, another one coming off Africa. It's the consequence of a very warm Atlantic. All right? Don't forget, we are on Patreon, Discord, live cams when they're up, all kinds of exclusive stuff. Plus, you help to crowdfund what we do. A great community over there, over 500 and something strong. I think we're at 535 right now, and those are some great people that help us to do what we do. If you want to become a part of it, get the Patreon app and search HurricaneTrack or patreon.com/HurricaneTrack. So yeah, very unusual. I think we can all agree. We'll see what happens. I think by later today we could have a new tropical depression, and maybe eventually that becomes Brett, and the one behind it, 93L, that could become Cindy. You never know. We shall see. All right, as I mentioned the other day, I am doing some traveling with the family. I guess I better do it now. I guess things are going to get busy later, it does appear. But I will be doing these updates, so I'll have another one for you tomorrow. All right, for now, let's get this online, and I'll wish you a happy Monday. And as always, thanks for tuning in. I am Mark Sudduth for Hurricane Track. I'll talk to you again tomorrow morning.